Who are you?
And where are you going? What do you want?
Well, that was a little weird. It hasn't done that before, an echo on the bumper. But anyway, hello and welcome to Trust and Estates Weekly. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and I'm here every Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific time to talk about estate planning and trust and probate administration, primarily for people who, like myself and my guest, are professionals in this space, but also for you if you are working on your own estate plan, or maybe you're in the midst of acting as the executor for someone, and you're just trying to figure out what's going on. So this is a good place to come and learn about all the ins and outs of estate planning and administration. So this morning, very happy to welcome my guest, Paul Freed. Paul is the founder of I Made the Arrangements, and we actually met through a mutual friend, Jeff Crilly, who is a genius at sort of finding people who, among other things, have very interesting businesses and help bring them to the attention of the larger public. I know Jeff helped me with that some years back. I was doing a bunch of radio appearances. So Paul, first of all, welcome to the show.
Kevin, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. So start out. I often use this as an entry question to my guests on my show, People Making Money, but I think it's particularly apt here. I don't imagine as a kid you were thinking to yourself, when I grow up, I want to create a website that helps people, right, make final arrangements for their loved ones. First of all, there probably weren't websites when we were kids. I know there wasn't when I was. I don't want to date you, right? But give us a little bit of your background so we can get a sense of, how it is you ended up starting this new venture.
So I'll kind of preface with, I'm kind of an idea guy. I've been involved in a bunch of different businesses over the course of my life, and but this is pretty interesting. So I've always been very big on funerals, paying last respects. It's something that was instilled in me early on, and look, what I truly believe is that look, you never get a second opportunity to say goodbye to somebody, right? Mm-hmm. And when you start thinking about life cycle events, the birth of children, weddings, things like that, listen, you can get a second opportunity to attend somebody's wedding, right?
Unfortunately, yes.
You'll never get a second opportunity to say goodbye. And I've always thought about funerals as being kind of the last opportunity you get to say goodbye to your loved ones. This is the last impression you're going to make on your friends, your family, and yet nobody really takes control of that. I remember going back, and I'll date myself now. So when VCRs came out, right, and you had those kind of and they were kind of big, bulky video recorders when they first came out.
Yeah. But
still a lot more streamlined than Dad's Super 8 with the bulbs and everything else. And one of the things that I had thought about as soon as I got one was, this would be cool because now I can kind of film my own eulogy and have that kind of stored away. Mm-hmm. I didn't want to. The last impression that I was making on my loved ones, I didn't want that to be, look, God willing, I'll live to 95, 100 years old, but I didn't want that to be the image. So I thought, while I'm kind of young and spry, put together a nice video that could be played at this end of life celebration. So I've been thinking about this for a long time. It amazes me that people ignore this topic. Look, you and I spent some time on the phone a couple weeks ago, and I thought that was great. It was just, the conversation just flowed, and I appreciate your perspective. So, when you start thinking about these statistics, right, and this is as recent as this year, right, that 24% of Americans have a will, right? It's mind blowing. And when you start thinking about things like life insurance or even retirement plans, right? Less than 40% of Americans have these things, and it's because when it's suggested that perhaps you take out a life insurance policy, you're 30 years old, and you know what, you just believe you're going to be here forever, and you put it off. All right, I don't need that now. I'm young. And then, of course, fast forward 30 years, you're 60 years old, and you got a couple of kids, you put them through college, you got a mortgage, you got this. Yeah, maybe I should look for that life insurance now. Well, you're kind of priced out of the marketplace at that point,
Right.
And then people just kind of forget about it, and that's it. So how this website kind of came about. Always thinking about kind of saying goodbye, always thinking about funerals and the importance of those, and then thinking about legacy and legacy planning. What we know is that three generations from now, nobody's going to remember us. Right? There's not much, if anything, I can tell you about my great grandparents. Right? There's a little bit I could tell you about my grandparents. And look, maybe you'll have a photograph that may hang around for one or two generations, but after that, that's it, right? So, my father was a Holocaust survivor, and in January of 24, my cousin and I visited Auschwitz. It was the 79th anniversary of the liberation of the camp. They were having a ceremony. He and I went, and spent about a week in Poland and Germany, kind of bouncing around to some of these different camps. And it was really life-changing for me. Kind of walking through some of these facilities, and the one thing that really kind of stuck with me is kind of walking through one of these buildings at Auschwitz, and the walls were just lined with these photographs, these portraits of these kind of empty faces. And I gave some thought to what their end of life planning was and what their legacy was, and really felt like I needed to do something. I didn't know what. And when I got home, I started kind of putting a pen to paper, started thinking about legacy planning, started thinking about things like that. So started kind of putting together a concept for a website. I'm not a real tech guy. I rely on my 12-year-old daughter to get me through kind of iPhone struggles. But I said, I think I'm going to start developing a website for end of life planning. And so we started kind of playing around. We started putting this concept together, and it just started to kind of morph into something a little bigger than I had hoped or planned. All of the professionals that I brought in on this could relate to the topic. Everybody has a story. Everybody can identify. It's amazing. So what started out as kind of a simple, kind of funeral planner, right? Like laying out the logistics of kind of what you want your funeral or end of life ceremony to look like. And for us, the whole concept here was kind of end of life wishes. So we labeled this document the wish capture. So you can go into the website and you can start to kind of fill in the blanks, check the boxes, and create a funeral plan. And this is really just the logistics of this ceremony. Do you want to be buried? Do you want to be cremated? what you like done with your ashes? Would you like any readings? Who would you like to read them? Would you like uh, who would you like as pallbearers? Like all of the logistics. And it's amazing, right? So I met so many people throughout the course of the year and a half that we were working on this, and one story that really kind of stood out. So a woman had lost her mom, and she and her sister got together and they cremated mom, and um, they had two urns, and they each took one, and then a couple months later they went to mom's house to start emptying it out, and they came across a legal pad with mom's funeral requirements, and it laid out the casket she wanted, where she wanted to be buried, and they just looked at each other like just lost, like wow, right? I mean, they went and cremated their mother. Mom went to the extent of writing all this down, which is more than most people do, but still couldn't bring herself to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what we know. I mean, like our generation, certainly our parents, right? Like this was this taboo topic, um, and we just don't talk about it. So, we've kind of since become like a death denying culture, as if we don't talk about it, maybe it won't happen.
Right.
And and in the meantime, people are kind of left scrambling, trying to figure out what to do. Uh, you talk a little bit about probate, and when I think about a will, um, what people need to understand is that whether you've documented this or not, there's something in place for you, right? Your state has something waiting, and the one thing I can assure you of is that the state doesn't care who gets your home. So a will is so important, and okay, and people need to understand this as well, that um, if the cost of preparing a will is the deterrent, it, you can write it on a napkin, sign it, have it witnessed, have it notarized, file it. It doesn't need to be a detailed legal document. But listen, any plan is better than no plan. And go ahead.
Yeah. So I was just going to observe, because you've hit on a number of points that I think involve this, and that is, and this is something I've noticed, and I think we talked about this, that prior to what I do now, I was a chaplain in the Navy, right? And it really has struck me over the last couple of years how much inattention is paid to the emotional side of the work that I and my colleagues do, right? Because anytime I'm getting involved in a situation, it means ipso facto, right? Somebody has died. Now, in most cases, I think that people are upset about that. But in some cases, they're overjoyed, or some of them are overjoyed, and while others are upset. And when there is no will and there is no end of life plan, what that tends to do is um, increase the depth of the emotional response because of the uncertainty that's there, right? And there, of the, I don't know, probably close to 150 guests I've had on this show, I think less than 10% of them have dealt with these kinds of aspects. And it's not to put the guests down, it's just that we are focused so much on the financial side of what happens when someone dies, that kind of overtakes everything else. And yet, at least in my experience, maybe this is just my practice, the emotional side of things is what makes dealing with the financial side of things much more difficult.
I think that I have these conversations often, and sites like ours, work that you do, right? These are tools that people can use to kind of reduce the stress,
Mhm.
right, associated with the grief, right?
Mhm.
Grief being the emotion, right?
Mhm.
And I think grief is a beautiful emotion, right?
Mhm.
Grief shows love,
Absolutely.
and nobody wants to eliminate that. But when you think about the stress that's associated with that grief, when
Mhm.
there are no plans in place, it just it's everything just kind of explodes. It, listen, things like this story we just talked about, right? Bury, cremate, right?
Mhm.
What should we dress dad in? What kind of a box should we get dad? What right? Where should we bury dad? All of this. Listen, no loving, caring human being wants to leave this chaos behind, right? And
Mhm.
I think if people really knew about kind of some of that chaos, right? Look, planning for your end of life, this is not morbid, right? This is really an act of love. This is an act of caring, and you're going to provide peace of mind for your loved ones. And
Mhm.
I think about this all the time, right? Like I want my children, my loved ones to mourn and to grieve as they should, right? Without having to worry about what readings, where are we going to have this celebration? What are we? Um, and listen, my kids are tired of hearing about it already. It's like, okay, we know, okay, you're gonna die. You want a beach party. You want
Pick up
sushi.
already.
But that's the other thing, right? We've been taught this since we were kids, right? You have a problem, you have an issue, you have a concern, talk it out, right? You've heard this. You have a problem, talk it out, talk it out, talk it
Mhm.
out. And what I know is that if people could start talking about this, they would start to feel a little more at ease with their mortality.
Mhm.
I, I've I've experienced this myself, and people around me are starting to experience it as well because I don't shut up about it. Um, and look, there were nights where I used to wake up in a cold sweat thinking about the fact that one day it's all going to be over.
Right.
Um, but I will say that the more I talk about it, the easier it gets.
Mhm.
There's no doubt. There's no
Yeah,
doubt.
for sure. Let's take a quick sponsor break, and then we'll pick it up because I want to, if it's okay, show people your website so they can see what it's all about.
That'd be awesome.
When life brings
When life
unexpected
brings unexpected
changes,
changes,
managing inherited
managing
property
inherited
shouldn't
property
add to your
shouldn't add to
stress.
your stress.
Magnum Properties
Magnum Properties
specializes in
specializes
probate and
in
trust.
probate.
Okay, well, I'm going to cut that short because something's wrong with the audio here, and that won't help.
Got it.
So, I queued up your website here. Let me go ahead and share the screen, and oops. Yeah, so you can see that, so this is your website here. I made the arrangements, and talk a little bit, if you would, about how the website, how people can use the website, how it will help
Sure.
them with these issues that we've been talking about.
So Kevin, if I am I able to grab the screen?
Am I able to share the screen with you?
Because
That's what.
I'm sending over. I know I don't know.
Yeah, no, let me look at the settings. Let's see. Video, audio. Nope, I'm not able to. Oh, you want to? Let's see.
Can let's see if you can see my screen now.
Okay, well, that's what I've got when I show your screen. Oop, there it goes. Okay, here,
Okay,
let me take this one off. Hold on one sec. Okay, there you go.
Okay, so you can see my screen.
I sure can.
Got it. So this is the site, and throughout the site, there's a lot of good information. Um, so kind of how the site works. There's a video here, and again, this just talks about the site itself, some testimonials. Here we have funeral resources. So if you're talking about end of life planning, you can click into any of these. This is how kind of an end of life doula could help. So there's definitely a bunch of info. Why plan ahead? So there's some statistics here and video, and again, why we think this is important, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a wish keeper. So again, right, thinking along the themes of this whole kind of final wishes concept. So a wish keeper is somebody that's going to assist you with all of these end of life arrangements. Think along the lines of an executor.
Okay.
So here's some of the things that they do for you and why you should, how you should choose. Starting the conversation again, right? Like taboo, right?
Mm-hmm.
So so let's start talking about it. And here's some tips on how you may want to go about doing that.
Interesting.
So this is sort of what an account would look like. So you would come in, and the wish capture, there are a series of questions. And again, these are really just about the logistics of your end of life ceremony or your funeral. And it's check the box, fill in the blanks kind of thing. You can leave some more details here if you'd like. And you'll just walk through.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And, once you're done, save and exit. Send your responses. So now the system will now email you back a hard copy of that, and I'll show you what that looks like. So now you have a document that you can share with your loved ones. And we took that same logic and said, well, let's create a will builder. And this is the same thing. This is a fill in the blank, check the box document.
Mm-hmm.
And it would take you 15 to 30 minutes tops to fill this out, print it out, sign it, have it witnessed, notarized, file it with the county. Listen, of course, you want to check and make sure that, what your area requirements may be.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's all you would need. We did the same with an advance directive. So again, all your healthcare needs. And the nice thing about this is that you can come back in, once you create an account, you can come back in and you can make these changes and update this whenever you need. You don't have to, there's no additional fees. And we'll talk about membership in a minute. But so the wish keeper, again, we talked a little bit about this. You'll invite your wish keeper through the system, and this is really how you'll vet them. Obviously, they're going to know this is coming, but you're going to fill out their information, send them an invite, and then they'll accept, and they'll take on that role.
Mm-hmm.
Now, their key role or responsibility, at least for the time being, is to enter the date you pass. They'll have limited access to all the information you have here while you're alive. Once they enter the date of passing, they'll have full access, so they can go ahead and carry out these wishes for you.
Mm-hmm.
Contacts. So here, add as many contacts as you'd like: name, email address, phone number, relationship. And throughout this whole process, leave notes for your wish keeper.
Mm-hmm.
Create a notification of passing. So once that wish keeper enters the date you pass, all of your contacts will get an email from you letting them know that you passed away. And you think about this, and I'm sure you've run into this from time to time, right? You bump into a mutual friend, and they'll tell you about the passing of another buddy, and it's like, wow, I wish I would have known. I would have loved to go to the funeral.
Right.
But again, right, families have a very short window of time to put all this together.
Mhm.
Because we don't talk about this, right? We, death always comes as a surprise, right? Regardless of age, health conditions, it's like all of a sudden. So there's been no planning. Now you have 24 to 48 hours to put this end of life ceremony or this funeral together, and you're going to overlook some people for sure. So again, the site is really about kind of taking control of this yourself. Okay. So here's some tips on what you may want to say in that email. You can write your own obituary, write your own eulogy, upload a video eulogy, and again, leave notes here for your wish keeper. You can securely store account information here. Okay. Now, you've experienced this, I'm sure. There's some account information that's missing, and all of a sudden an estate gets tied up in probate, and it's wow, right? So anything from email passwords to social media accounts, gym memberships, bank accounts, utility bills, anything, right? Leave all that information here so your family knows exactly what accounts have to be closed. Final thoughts. So here's a feature where you can come in, choose a contact, and create an email or a text message to go out after you pass. So you can set a calendar date.
Wow.
Or you can set it up to go out X amount of days after you pass. Now, the thought behind this, listen, there's so many things you can do here. And again, right, a lot of people, they think, oh, that's kind of eerie. Look, a lot of times, we just can't bring ourselves to say goodbye. And sometimes we don't know it's coming. So, prepare a goodbye letter. Let people know what they meant to you. This is really some interesting stuff, and this feature came about. So I was adopted, and I was adopted at 6 days old, and through the powers of online DNA sources, I made contact with my birth mother about 7 years ago. And here's a woman who gave birth to me way back when. She got pregnant at 16, delivered me at 17. And the only people that knew about this were her mother, her father, and her gynecologist. Right? That was it. She kept this a secret from everybody. She never spoke of this. Her and I carried on a phone relationship for about 3 years. And she had been married for a number of years. She has 2 other children. She's never told her husband about this. She's never told her children about this. She's never spoken to a therapist about this. And I couldn't help but think, how carrying something like this your whole life would affect you. So I thought, it'd be great to have a tool where somebody could, if they wanted to, just clean their soul, right? Just go through a little cleansing before you leave. So there's a lot to do with a feature like this. Photos and videos, and again, create a montage of photos at the end of my life. So again, leave these notes for your wish keeper. We sync with Spotify, so if you want to create a playlist, you can do that. And then anything else you want to leave behind, leave all that information here.
Mhm.
So many times, right? People will pass, and there's cars, right? It's like, where's the title to the car? Nobody knows.
Mhm.
People end up having to junk the car because they can't find the title to it. So all that information, just plug it in here. And then ultimately, what you can do is you can create an online legacy. We kind of touched base on that before, right? Where, a couple of generations down the road, you're kind of forgotten, right?
Mhm.
So now you can create an online legacy, and, people want to Google you, 100 years from now. I had this great, great, great grandfather. Let me see what he was all about.
Mhm.
And, and here they can listen to a video of you kind of telling your story. Um, so it's, it's a pretty comprehensive kind of end of life planning site.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. So, um, let's for the person whose parent is reluctant to talk to them about these things,
Mm.
right? And the parent is not going to do it on their own. How would you advise them to approach this, and how might um, your website help with sort of breaching that gap? I know for myself, this is a subject that my mother does not want to talk about, and she just won't. You right?
Yeah.
Other people, maybe they're reluctant to talk about it, but with the right approach or the right coaching, they will open themselves up to what really ought to be done. So what would you say for, it's really like the children, or the other, the loved ones of someone who needs to do this?
So it's interesting. I believe everybody knows somebody who has a story, right?
Hmm.
And I'll give you this example. So I was talking with a woman recently, and I was walking her through the website, and she was really kind of moved by what we had put together. And she said, and while we were on this Zoom, I could see she was kind of doing something else, and I was thinking, well, maybe she's not paying attention to me. And then she apologized, and she said, I just forwarded my mother your website. So 2 weeks ago, this girl buried her aunt,
Hmm.
and she said they thought that her aunt had made all the arrangements and taken care of all of this, and then come to find out there was nothing.
Hmm.
And she said it was mayhem. It was pure chaos. Even just the logistics of the funeral itself. So I think the way to approach it is, look, again, this is truly an act of love, and I don't believe anybody, any caring human being, wants to leave chaos behind. They don't. Certainly, they don't want to leave that for their children. But again, because this is just this topic that we don't talk about, right? So to find a story, to find a friend, a relative who has experienced this kind of loss and chaos associated with it, by not planning, is a great way to do it. And everybody, I'm telling you, everybody knows somebody.
Hmm.
Um, and look, this is really, I know for me, speaking for myself, right? This is my responsibility. This is not my children's responsibility. Um, these are my affairs, and these are my wants, my desires. So, um, And again, I want them to be able to mourn and to grieve as they should,
Mhm.
right? Because again, what we know is there's this kind of small window, and you've heard it over and over, right? Like, look, in the beginning, right? There's a lot of crying, there's a lot of tears, and like a week later, right? Like they start to subside a little bit, and then before you know it, people are back to work, and it just you become kind of a thing of the past. It's like nobody's really thinking about it anymore. Uh, what I don't want is I don't want my children to have to look probate, right? It's a great example. It's like, look, this could linger on for months or years,
Mhm.
right? Could be very costly.
Mhm.
And if there's siblings involved, it's like, whoa, right? So now, each sibling is going to retain their own counsel, and before you know it, you've got lawyers fighting against each other and siblings fighting against each other, and you got World War III on your hands.
Mhm.
Um, if parents knew, if people knew that this was what's in store for their loved ones, um, they'd be more apt to say, you know what, let's try to avoid that.
Yeah. So you brought up a number of issues in it that I think are worth highlighting, and that is that it's really um, the person's responsibility to make all these arrangements and see to it it's there so that their loved ones can actually have the space, the mental space, if you will, to grieve. I think it's interesting to note as well that. Uh, Even if someone has a life insurance policy, for example, and the expectation is, okay, well, when I die, so then the policy is going to pay off, and there will be money there for a funeral. It's extremely unlikely that life insurance policy is going to pay off in time to pay for funeral expenses, unless you're planning a funeral, 30, 60, 90 days, from date of death. And there aren't I don't think there are any, funeral homes that will, um, uh, perform burial services on credit. So it means that your loved ones are going to have to pay the cost of the funeral or of whatever is done, probably out of their pocket. Now they can get reimbursed afterwards, but in the immediacy of what's going on, that is something that's going to come up. And two, there are ways to plan for that as well. So uh, there are insurance policies specifically designed to pay for these. To pay for funerals and memorial services, etc., and they do pay off essentially immediately. All you do is present a death certificate, and that's pretty much it. But of course, that all has to be planned for, and it has to be planned for while you're still alive, right?
Right?
Your children, your loved ones are not going to be able to buy that policy, right,
Yeah.
once you're gone. So, um,
So there are some more reputable funeral homes that will accept a uh, a life insurance policy as collateral,
mhm,
right? So they will go ahead and kind of extend that credit till the insurance company pays the claim. Uh, but one of the things that we're adding to our site, we're partnering up with an insurance company to offer um, kind of final expense policies.
mhm,
So they'll be available in $5,000 denominations. So $5,000, $10,000, or $15,000.
mhm.
So and again, thinking about just a comprehensive end of life plan. So hey, it's all paid for.
Right. And
So
that's a big burden to take off of your loved ones. So they don't even have it, it's all there and done. And this is one of the things I noticed from my work as a chaplain is if people are so involved making the arrangements, seeing that expenses are all these things, all the sort of tasks of arranging this, they probably aren't going to grieve. But it's not as if the need goes away. It's just at some point in the future, it essentially ambushes them,
yeah,
right? And so now all of a sudden they're feeling horrible. They can't figure out why. Oftentimes I was able to trace it back to a time where in their life where they should have had the opportunity to grieve, but for logistical reasons, etc., they didn't. And now here it is, a year or two, even 3-4 years later, and something happens that triggers that need to grieve, and
Right.
and there they are, right? And I call it ambushing, because they really are. For them, like you said, it's done, it's forgotten. I mean, it's not forgotten in the sense they never think of it, but I mean,
Sure.
it's not part of their awareness.
Right.
And
You know,
there you go.
when you talk about the financial implication with regard to funerals, and they're expensive,
Mhm.
right? Uh, and look, it's there's a trend now. What people are doing is people are donating the body to science,
Mhm.
and what ultimately happens is, uh, the wherever the body ends up, they take whatever parts they need, they cremate the balance, and send back the ashes. So it's kind of like a free cremation.
Mhm.
But because this is really it's interesting how many people, again, because we don't talk, we don't plan, right? So yeah, there's more times than not that people are dying and there's no money to bury them.
Mhm.
It's unfortunate. Um, One of the things that we've been kicking around and we've been reading up on is, and we may have talked about it when we were on the phone a couple weeks ago, Swedish death cleansing.
Mm. Mhm.
So Swedish death cleansing or Swedish death cleaning, um, obviously started over in Sweden, is really kind of making its way over here now, and people are starting to practice this a little bit. And it's really the act of kind of purging uh, towards the end of your life. And most people experience this, right? Mom and dad pass away, you go into the home, and it's just like, wow, right? You have
Mhm.
all this stuff, and what do you do with it? And look, and everything kind of has a sentimental value, right? It's so siblings don't want to part with anything, and it just, again, it's more of that kind of chaos. It's like, well, no, but this was Dad's stapler that he used. You can't throw that away, and so. But what people are doing now, and of course, if Dad were there, he'd say, "Yeah, you can get rid of it," right? Um,
Exactly.
so people are taking control of it, and saying, you know what, like, I'm not gonna do this to my children. I'm gonna go through. I'm gonna start to downsize, get rid of my stuff, and so they're donating or selling or giving away. It is throwing out.
Mhm.
So uh, what we're seeing is we're seeing that, like, the millennials and the Gen Zers, the Gen Xers, right? They're more apt to take control and talk about these things, plan for this, than the baby boomers. The baby boomers are just, it's no, no, no. We don't talk about it.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, we got it honestly from our parents.
It's true. Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't know what the conversation would be if I ever, had said, "Hey, Dad, come on, let's sit down and let's plan out your funeral."
Yeah.
Like, yeah, he'd throw me out of the room immediately.
I think too that uh oh shoot, I lost the thought. But so I know, for my dad, um no one was anticipating that he was going to die.
Mm.
He was in reasonably good health. He went in for really a minor procedure, and something didn't go right. And the next day he was gone. He was dead.
Right.
Right. And so there's a whole aspect of this, I think, that also oftentimes gets overlooked. And that is, we're so used to thinking of, well, I'm going to get sick. I'm going to sort of linger, right? But I know I'm going to know what's coming up, right? And so, there'll be time, right? But that is not necessarily the case. One of the largest states that I'm handling, there was no inkling that the decedent was going to die. He was in good health, and he literally just dropped dead in a store one day, and that was it. And he was in the midst of doing an estate plan, all this kind of stuff, but he never got it done. And I think part of it was perhaps a reluctance to sort of face those issues.
Right.
But then in the end, it was just like it was over like that, And so the idea that there is time, I think that's at least for a certain percentage of people, that's a fallacy. And you don't even have to be particularly old for that to happen. God forbid, right? You're on a ski trip and
Exactly.
unfortunately things like that happen, or
Yeah.
or even things even more tragic, like we unfortunately hear, in the news too often.
Yes.
And so now you've got a tragic situation compounded by the chaos of not having any kind of planning for
And that's one of the things too, right? Like
situations.
and I don't know if it's arrogance, I'm not sure, but we throw terms around like, forever, a lifetime.
Mm.
Listen, a lifetime is 76 years in America currently, right? And look, there's a lot of things that get factored into that number, but listen, you've got to play the average, right? I mean, we just saw recently a couple of these celebrities, right? I mean, look, Ozzy Osbourne, 76, boom, on the button. Um, so, um, but if you think about 76 years in the overall scheme of things, right? When you compare that to humankind, been here about 300,000 years, the universe, billions, they're saying.
Mhm.
76 is a blink of an eye. And we all know it. Listen, as we get older, right, this is when it becomes more valuable, right?
Mhm.
Listen, I'm 62, so 76. I'm like 14. It's like, I think about the past 14 years and how quick they went. So like, whoa. Now, of course, I hope that I'm living a healthy enough life and I'm taking good enough care of myself that I'll blow past that 76. But as you stated, who knows, right? You're every time you get behind the wheel of the car, you don't know, right?
Right.
Uh,
Right.
God forbid. So, um, you know, it's never too soon to make these arrangements, right? Um, and again, the chaos and the stress that you can alleviate for your loved ones by taking care of that ahead of time is it's immeasurable. It's again just a pure act of love.
Yeah, it is interesting because whatever one does in this regard, they're not going to be around, right? So they're not going to get thanked for it, at least not, when
Right.
they're alive, right? So it is an expert. So we're getting close to wrapping this up, and I've been sort of hesitating to ask you this question, and I don't want to end on a down note.
Sure.
But I'd love to hear your response to this. So, from time to time, I talk to people about these issues, and I ask them, "Do you have an estate plan? Do you have an end of life plan?" And they say, "No, I don't." And I say, "Well, for the well-being of the people you're leaving behind, your loved ones, you might want to consider doing so." And they'll say, "Are you kidding? I want them fighting." And I'm curious. I mean, I don't want to lead the witness, as we say, but I love to hear, your response to that.
No, you don't. That's the response. No, you don't. Um, so, and again, look, I think that for most people, um, it's fear. They don't want to. They just don't want to talk about it. They don't want to face their own mortality. Um, look, within our site, we didn't really get into kind of membership, but you can go to our website, imadethearrangements.com, and for $49.95, you could create a funeral plan, a will, and an advance directive.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Listen, there's no excuse not to do that. Um, you know, and again, no loving human being wants to leave behind chaos. They don't. And look, jokingly, they may say, "Oh, let them fight it out." But you know what? If they realized the extent of the damage, right? Again, a state's tied up in the courts for years, sometimes years, costing tens of thousands of dollars in legal fees. You don't want that. Trust me, you don't.
Mm-hmm. So, in the end, and I think this is, and if I'm summing up your message, I made the arrangements. It's really for the living, so that those we leave behind can have fond, solidly good memories of us, can make their way through the grieving process reasonably well, and can go on to lives that will flourish, because at one of the worst moments in their lives, there was somebody who loved them enough to do whatever could be done to keep them out of the chaos, whether it's emotional or financial.
And that was the plan, right? Relieve your loved ones of this burden, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Paul, I really appreciate you coming on the show and bringing this message. It is so important. I will put a link to your website in the show notes. So, people who want to look into it more, they'll be able to do so. And I'll also put, if you'd like, I'll put your contact information. So if there are, people who'd like to be in touch with you to, talk about this and maybe even talk about how they can join you in spreading the word about what you're doing here.
That would be great. Listen, Kevin, it's been a pleasure chatting with you as it was the last time we spoke. And if you ever care to reach out, please do. Yeah, I really enjoyed this, and thank you so much for the work that you do, and thanks for including me.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'm gonna have you hang tight here for just a minute while I do a quick wrap up.
Sure.
So, thank you all very much for joining us. I know we've had a number of live viewers on with us to watch the proceedings. Always good to see you. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific time is my show, Business Lessons from the Military. On Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time is my show, People Making Money. It's our monthly Economic Echoes. So I hope you'll join me. Oh, no, I take that back. Economic Echoes was last week. So I forget what the topic is for this week. But anyway, it'll be 10 a.m. Pacific time, Wednesday, People Making Money. And then on Thursday is my every other week show at 5 p.m. Pacific time, Jiggers' Place. We're going to sit back, have a cocktail as we head to the end of the week, and we're going to talk about the greatest film genre, that is film noir. So if you like the gritty city and the tough detectives and those dangerous femme fatale who seem to inhabit there, join me for a drink and a schmooze on Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific time. And then we'll be back a week from today for the next edition of Trust and Estates Weekly. So once again, Paul, thank you so much for being on the show today. If I had let it go, we talked for 2 hours, but it was really great speaking to you.
Likewise.
And signing off as I always do, this is my bid for my dear friend Marie to never be forgotten. She was such a wonderful part of my life, and I had the honor of taking care of her for the last year that she was here on this mortal coil, as Shakespeare called it. So, Marie, darling, you are and ever will be my belle. Courage at all times, my friends.